going to be doing the front panel. You can screenshot this here. I just drafted up a quick pattern so you can see what we're doing. These are going to be the dimensions that I'm using. Okay, just getting right into it. I'm using 150 grams of Simplicity by Hikoo. This pattern is based off measurements, so you can pretty much use any yarn you want. I'm using a 4.5mm hook, something to cut with, and of course something to measure with. Getting right into it, I'm doing a slip stitch. So for the chain, we're not doing a regular chain. We are doing a foundation chain. If you don't know what that is, you need to look it up. It's really easy to do. I'm doing it here. I am going to do a foundation chain that is half the size of my bust. My bust is 32 inches. So in order to get 16 stitches, I did a foundation chain of about 57. Sorry, not about, but exactly, because you are going to want to do multiples of 3. This is really important, especially for the foundation chain. So you want to make sure that the number of stitches that you do is divisible by 3. This is going to be really important because each stitch takes up 3 spaces. All done with my foundation chain. I'm just going back to double check to make sure it is 57 stitches. Now getting right into the first row, I am going to chain 5. Now we're going to skip 1, 2, 3 stitches and just make a single crochet into the 3rd stitch. For the next stitch, again, I am chaining 5, and it's just a chain of 5, and then another single crochet into the 3rd stitch from the chain. But you are going to do this all the way down to the end. I am going to show you this whole row in its entirety. Usually I wouldn't do that because it takes up like way too much time of the tutorial and it's very repetitive, but I just want you to get a handle on the chain 5 and then single crochet into the 3rd stitch from the chain here at the beginning, because we're going to be doing this throughout. Now the end of the row is going to be a little bit different, so stick around for that. So you've made it to the end of the first row. Congratulations and thank you for sticking around. Now we gotta go and do like a million more stitches. Once you get to the end of a row, it's a little bit different because we're having to make up for a side so that we can chain and turn our work and start on a new row. Go ahead and chain 5, but then also chain 3 after that. We're going to chain 8 in total to make up the side, because you want those extra 3 loops to add the side. That's the whole point. Now to turn your work and go back onto that row we just worked on the first bump, you're going to go into the 3rd loop, like the middle loop of the 5 in the chain, and do a single crochet and chain 5 like you regularly would. Again, a single crochet in the 3rd loop on the bump, and that's like the middle loop of the chain 5, so it makes sense. And basically you are going to do this all the way down the row. Here I am chaining 5 into the 3rd loop of the bump. I'm counting the loops this time for some reason. And And yeah, it's not too difficult. Once you get to the end, again, you're going to end off the row with a chain 5, and then you're going to chain 8, turn your work, and do the same thing over again. Now, how many rows do you need? This is all going to depend on your measurements. You are going to want to measure the thickest part of your arm, usually your upper bicep. Mine is 10.5 inches around. So I at least want my front panel to be half the size of my arm circumference, if that makes sense. I personally added, I think about 2 or 2.5 inches to each side, just because I wanted a little bit of extra length on the front panel and the back panel. But if you don't want that, you can basically just do like exactly half your arm circumference. But I recommend at least doing half, unless you just want it to be really tight. If you want it to be looser, you can make it looser. It's just whatever you're feeling. Now, personally for me, with a size 32 bust, I am going to go ahead and do 5 rows here. And once you get to the 5th row of doing this, stop, or whatever row you want it to go to, stop. And come back to the video, because the way we're going to do the row before we get to the shoulders, we're going to do it a little bit different, and I'll show you how. This is the last row of strictly chain 5 single crochet in the 3rd loop. Now I'm going to show you how you're going to do the last row before we get to the shoulders. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches, and count 6 stitches again on the other side. So I have them both marked. I'm going to take a crochet marker. You can take a paper clip, you can take a bobby pin, anything to mark these specific stitches. I am marking these here because this is where I personally want my shoulders to start. This is going to make for a wider neckline for me. This is what I want. If you want your neckline to be a little bit smaller, you can take it in 1 or 2 stitches towards the middle. We're going to start this row like we usually would. I'm just going to chain 8 here. Similar to all the other rows, we're going to start off just the same. You're going to chain 8. Chain real slow here, trying to get the point across. Turn your work. Single crochet into that 3rd loop of the bump. Chain 5. And single crochet into the 3rd loop of that next bump. We know what's going on here. We've been doing this, it's fine. Once you get to your marker, I'm gonna ask you to stop, because we're gonna do something a little different. Okay, so I chain 5, and I'm just going into the 3rd loop on that bump with the marker in it. But from here, we're only going to chain 3. In between the markers, we're going to chain 3. And then into the 3rd bump, or 3rd loop of the next bump, just like so. Chain 3 into the 3rd loop of the next bump, all the way through this little middle gap here.
in between where you marked it off. Oh, I made a little oopsie. That's fine, it happens. But yes, just keep chaining 3 single crochet into the 3rd loop like normal of each bump. And once we get to the next marker, before we get to the marker, we're going to chain 5 before we get to the marker. Basically here, what we want to accomplish is equal amounts of 5 chain bumps on the outside of the 3 chain bumps. For the rest of the row, you're just going to keep chaining 5, single crochet into that middle loop, the 3rd loop of the next bump. Keep doing that until you get to the end of the row. Now we've gotten to the end of that row, and that is the bottom of the front panel. This is exciting stuff. We're about to start on the sleeves. So like normal, we are going to chain 8 to make up that side. Whenever we're at a side, let's just assume we're going to chain 8 probably. Turn our work. You know the deal, 3rd loop, single crochet, chain 5, 3rd loop, single crochet into that next bump. Oh my gosh, repetitive, isn't it? That's what makes it so fun. We are only doing this for these 6 stitches. So once you get to the 6th bump, we're gonna turn it around. Stick around for that. Okay, so the way I know that I should turn it around right now is we got to those chain 3 stitches from the last row. We don't want to go into those. No, we're going to turn it around. We're going to chain 8 and turn our work and just go back through those 6 stitches. So again, just like normal, single crochet into that 3rd loop, chain 5, single crochet into the 3rd loop of the next bump. We're going to keep doing that until we get to the outer edge. And then again, chain 8 and turn your work once you get to the outside edge. I personally, as a size small, am doing 7 rows of this. The sleeves are pretty important because they kind of hang off the shoulder and make up like that rounded part of your arm. The 7 rows make up about 5 inches,
that is a little under half of my arm circumference, like the widest part of my arm circumference. While you're in the process of adding rows, you can just hold it up to your body and measure it that way too if you don't have like a true tape measure or just something to measure your body with. So just continuing to add rows here until I get to 7. And before you get to your last row for your personal bolero, you need to stop because we're going to do it a little differently. Now we are finishing off an edge. I'm only chaining 5 for this last row and turning my work into the 3rd loop of that first bump. I'm going to chain 3, go into the 3rd loop of the next bump, chain 3, the 3rd loop, and chain 3 again, just until we get to the end. And once you chain 3 and single crocheted into the 3rd loop of that last stitch, you're done with that shoulder. And then we're gonna move on to the next shoulder. So once you finish that one, come back. For some reason, the original video, I think my camera died and I didn't get like this very last stitch part, but you'll see it next. So right here, I'm just taking a new piece of thread and slip stitching into the single crochet, not into a bump, into the single crochet before the markered stitch. Once you've got steady ground, we're just gonna start chaining 8. So you're gonna chain 8, not 5, but 8 for this first stitch. Turn your work, 3rd loop of that first stitch, chain 5, and we are going to do this shoulder exactly how we did the other shoulder. So once I'm finished with these 7 rows, we are going to start on the back panel. Woo! Thank you for sticking around for panel 1. And we are gonna get over to panel 2 as soon as this baby's done. Just finished panel 1 and she's looking good. This is our front panel. She's a little bit lower in the front. Oh, she's looking so good. I'm gonna take out those markers though. You don't wanna leave those in there. I'm not gonna clean up anything yet, just in case I have to unravel something. That's just the rule of thumb when it comes to crocheting. Don't clean up your ends because you might have to redo something. Starting on the back panel, it's going to be identical to the front panel, but this time we are adjusting how many rows are in the bottom and on the sleeve parts. We're just going to slip stitch straight into the next foundation chain. This foundation chain is going to be exactly as long as the first one, 57 stitches. For me personally, whatever amount of stitches that you did divisible by 3, you are going to do here too. I really recommend keeping count of these stitches. It's really important
at the beginning of these panels to keep count, because you're going to be really annoyed when you get to your first row, the end of your first row, and it's not divisible by 3. It's always a bummer, and you have to unravel everything. One reason I do foundation chains instead of just a regular chain is because of how stretchy they are. They allow for a lot of give, whereas just a basic chain, there's no stretch whatsoever. Starting this off the exact same way, we're doing pretty much everything the same. Chain 5 for the first stitch, single crochet into the 3rd loop from the chain, all the way down the row, chain 5, single crochet, 3rd loop from the chain. You get it. And of course, once we hit the next side, we're going to chain 8, turn our work, 3rd loop. You're going to single crochet into the 3rd loop, chain 5. I mean, you guys know what to do. The only thing that's changing here is the amount of rows we are doing for the bottom of the body. So this time I took the bottom of this panel all the way up to 9 rows. Basically all this does is make the back higher up from the front. This just allows more space on your upper back in the garment and just makes the garment a little bit more comfortable and sit better on the shoulders. We are just going in here, counting these 6 bumps again, marking them. I'm doing my last row before I get to the shoulders exactly how we did the front. If you remember, great. I'm just going back over something we pretty much already done, but this is kind of a tricky row, so just keep watching if you didn't get it the first time. Chain 8, turn your work, and do those first 6 bumps before you get to the little marker, just how we've been doing the rest of the rows. Chain 5, single crochet into that 3rd loop, chain 5, and so on.
Why?
Again, we're just going to go normally into that markered stitch, and those should all be chain 5. Now from here on out, we're going to chain 3 and then single crochet into the 3rd loop of the bump, 3 into the 3rd loop, chain 3 into the 3rd loop, all the way until we get to the stitch right before the next marked one. Okay, so once we've gotten here, right before we get to that next marker, we are going to chain 5. All the way down the rest of the row, we're just going to chain 5. 3rd loop, gonna single crochet, chain 5, all the way down, and start on that shoulder. gotten to the end of that row, you are going to chain 8, go single crochet into that third loop of the next bump, chain 5, all the way to the 6th stitch. This shoulder is exactly how we did the front panel. So once you get to that 6th stitch, you're going to chain 8 and turn it around. This time we are only doing 3 rows, and once you get to that last row, chain 5, turn your work, chain 3 down the rest of the row, just like we've done with all the other shoulders so far.
I just wanted to revisit my sketch to show you that the sleeve should be 4 rows in total once you finish that last row with the chain 3. Again, we are going to chain 5 before we get to the next marker. From here on out, we are going to be chain 5, single crochet into the 3rd loop of the rest of the bumps. Like I said, exactly like the first panel. So here I'm just counting to make sure that I have 3 rows here on the shoulder part, and I'm just turning it around, chain 5 instead of chaining 8. This 4th row is the last row, so we are chain 3, single crochet into the 3rd loop, and chain 3 again, single crochet into the 3rd loop of the next stitch, and do this all the way down. This is to create a straight edge that we can use in order to sew the back panel and the front panel together.
Why?
And there is our beautiful straight edge. You can choose to go ahead and start on the other shoulder, but since I'm already here and to eliminate a lot of hanging threads, I'm going to go ahead and start sewing these together. The front and back panel shoulders, just the top of the shoulders, I'm just going to do a single crochet into both the front and back. Here's another one of my lovely sketches where I'm just showing you where exactly you're going to sew the shoulders together. It's pretty easy, but I just wanted to give you a visual reference. I'm using a single crochet to sew these up because I just like the way that it looks, and it's very sturdy, holds together well. You can sew the shoulders together however you please, but this is just what I decided to do for my bolero. Now I am just cutting off the working yarn and finishing off this stitch and tying it. I just like how sturdy that this stitch is when you use it to sew pieces together. But this is what it looks like on the other side, on the right side I should say. Since I have not yet done the other side of the back shoulder, I'm going to go ahead and do that. And with that working yarn, I'm going to sew the front and back shoulders together using that single crochet. It's going to be pretty much exactly how we did it before. Again, you are going to want to start this other shoulder in a single crochet before you get to that 6th stitch. Just chaining 8 here. Gonna turn my work and single crochet into that first stitch at the 3rd loop. We're just gonna do the shoulder how we did the other back shoulder. 3 rows, and then once you get to that 4th row, chain 3 to finish off the edge. I'm sorry if this is a little bit repetitive, but here I am. I have the 3 rows again, and chaining 5, turning my work, going into that 3rd loop, chaining 3, going into the 3rd loop of that next bump, chain 3 all the way down, and here I am just sewing up the shoulders of the other sides of the panels using that single crochet stitch again. Just tying off all the loose ends here. You should have this lovely looking bib thing. I'm gonna start on the collar before I do the sleeves. With my working yarn, I'm just gonna go ahead and slip stitch into the back of the back panel. It doesn't really matter where you start. You could start at the sleeve. I just wouldn't start at the front. Once you've slip stitched into one of the stitches, you are going to chain 1 and start single crocheting into the circumference of the collar. It's okay if you skip a stitch every now and then here. You don't want to overcrowd the collar with stitches, especially because then your collar is going to kind of like flip out and not look very pristine. So I like to keep a kind of tighter collar, but not so tight that like your stitches in the garment bunch up. Basically, if you skip a stitch like every 10 stitches, that's fine. Once you make it all the way back around, you are just going to slip stitch in the first stitch that you made.
By creating an imaginary picture. Usually it's something that moves.
I'm gonna chain 1, turn my work, and start single crocheting into the stitches I just made. Anytime I get to a corner, just to kind of tighten up, I make 1 decrease in each corner just to kind of tighten the collar up a little bit. You don't have to do this, but I just do it so that the 2nd row like has no way to flip. Here I am making 1 little decrease in the collar right here at the corner, and then just continuing on with the single crochet until I get to the next corner. Alright, so we've made it back around. I'm just going to do another slip stitch, and these 2 rows are all I'm going to do for my collar. I don't want a super bulky collar. You could keep going if you wanted to. That's all I'm doing. I'm tying everything off. Look how nice our bib looks. Wow. Now to add sleeves, you're going to turn the right sides together so that the seams on the shoulders are facing out. You're going to want to measure your bicep for this. Mine is 10.5 inches. Right here I'm indicating I want about half that, so I'm doing 5.5 inches. And I'm going to mark that on my garment. You're going to put the markers at the same place on both sides so that your sleeves will be even. And so when you start your 2nd sleeve, you're not wondering where you should be starting. I went ahead and did the first sleeve from the top of the shoulder to the hand is what I measured. It's 29 inches for me, and it goes up to I think about 31 inches. You probably don't want to do more than a 31-inch sleeve unless you just have really long arms. So I'm taking the working yarn and slip stitching into the bottom of the front and back panels to sew them up together. Just like with the shoulders, I'm doing that single crochet, and I'm only doing this up until I get to the marker. I'm also just crocheting some loose ends into the seam so they'll kind of just like seamlessly be threaded throughout the garment. cutting off those loose ends and just pulling them into the garment so that they don't show anymore. And that's just a fun way to kind of tie up your loose ends. So I know I want 14 stitches in my sleeve. I'm just going to multiply that by 3. I'm going to get 42. 42 is the number of stitches I want going around the armhole. This means that you're going to probably want to skip like every other stitch when you're sewing around the armhole. I am chaining 1 and just going in and doing a single crochet like every other stitch. And I'm counting to 21. Once I get halfway there, I want 21 stitches so that the 42 stitches will be evenly dispersed. Now, to explain why I want 14 stitches is because I know that's going to make up about 10.5 inches for my arm. You can make the arm by doing it separately from the body and then sewing it onto the body. I just prefer doing it this way so that I can try it on and make sure that it fits while I'm making it. I'm indicating my halfway point. I have 21 stitches up to the seam of the shoulder. Yes, the calculator, because my brain can't do math. Just continuing single crochet until we get to the end. I counted, I have 42 stitches. Gonna slip stitch into the first stitch that we made here. And that is the beginning of your sleeve. So from here on out, I'm going to chain 5, single crochet into the third stitch from the chain 5 again, single crochet into the third stitch like we normally do, chain 5, single crochet into the third stitch all the way around. And this sleeve I do a little bit differently than I would like on my treble boleros, and I'll show you how.
By creating an imaginary picture. Usually it's something that moves.
So once we've made it full circle, we're going to chain 5 and go straight into that first stitch that we made into the third loop of the stitch. Chain 5, go into the next stitch. We're not turning, just go right into that next stitch in the third loop, single crochet, chain 5 again, single crochet into that next bump. We are going to do this continuously. We're not turning. I know that this is kind of a no-no when it comes to working in the round with crochet, but just trust me here, this is how I do it, and I found that it's the easiest way for like a seamless fishnet sleeve. Yeah, just keep working continuously in the round until your sleeve is to a length that you like. Again, from the shoulder to the end of the sleeve, I did 29 inches. A normal long sleeve is probably only going to go up to about 31-32 inches, but you can really make this as long or as short as you want. There's no limitations. Once you've gotten to the length that you want, come back to the video and we are going to do the cuffs. Just using my last sleeve as a reference, I'm making sure that the sleeve I'm working on is the same length before I start doing the cuffs. Working continuously in the round, it is difficult to know when to stop. I stop around where the thumb is, and I'll show you why. Once you've gotten to your desired length, you are going to chain 5, turn your work, and go into that bump, in the middle bump, the third bump from the chain, and do a single crochet, and we're only going to chain 2 for the rest of this round, and single crochet into the third loop in that bump, chain 2, single crochet into the third loop, of the bump, chain 2, single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into that third loop again, chain 2, and again third loop of that bump. You're just gonna keep chaining 2 around until you get back to the starting point. And once you get back to the starting point, just slip stitch in the third loop of that chain 5 that we made at the very beginning. And you'll see that there's this wider hole. I use this for the thumb hole in the garment. For the cuffs, we're just going to chain 1 and start single crocheting into each individual stitch around the cuff. Once you make it back around, you're of course going to slip stitch into that first stitch that we made. Chain 1, turn your work, and start on the second row of single crochets. I'm going to do this for 4 rows. You can do it for 2, you can do it for 5. It depends on how chunky you want your cuffs to be. I just want an extra inch or 2, so I'm just doing 4 rows. Once you're finished with this sleeve, you're going to do the exact same thing to the other sleeve, so just restart that part of the video. If you've made it this far in the video, we are all done. I'm just tying off my loose ends here. You're gonna clean up your threads, weave your ends in, make it look all pretty, and you know, get creative with it. I'm so excited to see what you guys do. Please tag me at LizNorris97 on Instagram, TikTok, anywhere you want. I want to see them. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.